Yeah, man, I had to go back. I had to click back and back and back. I realized you were with us 3 years ago, Brett. Early on in the podcast.
Yeah, and it's good, grateful to be here again. Right, a lot has
Yeah,
changed in 3 years, and it's good to be still podcasting, still in the same business. It's not easy. It's not easy to be consistent in business, and so I'm glad to be. You're here, and I'm here.
absolutely, without a doubt. And look, man, I know you got a. I wanted to invite you back on. You got a new book that's out that I'd love for you to share with our audience. I see it sitting there on your desk. And I got a wonderful text from you. I picked up a copy myself. And the reason I'm having you back on, one is to talk about your book, Brett, but also, there's a lot of people that have taken advantage of the 1031 exchange. There was a lot of nervousness and anxiety if the 1031 was going to disappear. In the past few years, we had guests on talking about that. And, now people are nervous to invest. And I think that, from my impression, the DST that we're going to talk about here can potentially be a tool for a lot of people that covers all those different topics. But first, share a little bit with the audience about yourself, Brett, your company, Capital Gains Tax Solutions, and your new book.
Absolutely, thanks, Chris. So, yeah, I grew up in the real estate industry, fell in love with real estate at a very young age, with my parents building homes mostly in the Silicon Valley, East Bay area, and California. And found out that it's great to have cash flow and it's great to have appreciation. It's great to be entrepreneurial, right? But my brother and I were the first two to actually graduate college on both sides of the family. So my
Wow.
parents did tell us, we don't want you making it just in hammering nails and building houses and such. So we actually want you to go to college. And so we went to college. I had a chance to play basketball on scholarship. 6-foot white guy who could play hoops. I still love it every single day if my knees don't fall apart. And so and then knew and kind of fell, and not really fell into, but I got invited to check out commercial real estate and an internship at a place called Marcus and Millichap, and that
Oh yeah.
began my love with investment, multifamily real estate investing and brokerage, and quickly learned about 1031 exchanges and how amazing those were. But it was 2006 at that time. Things were going pretty good, and then it quickly kind of shifted, and that's where
Yeah.
things kind of fell apart pretty quickly. And for those who had over leveraged, had too much debt, and not enough diversification, and perhaps had paid a little bit too much for those multifamily properties, where those cap rates were going so low. I saw friends, family, and clients lose half or everything over a few years, and
Yeah.
that began the journey of, well, we can build a massive amount of wealth in multifamily, but we've also got to be prudent and careful with how we structure deals. I heard Warren Buffett say it well yesterday. He says, "Hey, you basically can't, be in a good deal with a bad person." Well, I would say you can't be in a good multifamily deal with bad debt, right? And if you're in a bad
Yeah.
debt position, you can create this situation where now you are chasing the banks, and you are chasing rent, and now your operations are in a tough position because you're having to just pay it all in the debt service. And so bringing this all together, the 1031 exchange we learned was actually the enemy at this point, right? Because although it had deferred the capital gains tax, it had often pressured our clients to overpay for those properties, which has now put them in a compromised position when things shifted. And so we learned about the Deferred Sales Trust in 2009, and this became the solution to, or the alternative for, a traditional 1031 exchange. And now we just coach and train people how to do deferred sales trust, Delaware statutory trust, 1031 exchanges, right? But mainly the deferred sales trust is our niche, so that they don't have to ever feel trapped by that capital gains tax. They can still defer the tax, and they can invest at optimal timing without having to require any debt, although they can get debt if they want to when it makes sense. And so that's really the passionate focus that we're helping people with.
No, I love that. A couple years ago, a few years ago now, opportunity zones were big. And I had a friend who was selling his business, and actually a very close friend. And he said, "Man, Chris, if I sell my business and I invest this in an opportunity zone, even if I don't make anything for 10 years, I'll still come out ahead." And I said, "No, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not that's not actually true. Let's go through the math." But aside from that, people asked what I thought about opportunity zone funds. And I said, I don't know yet, because I said it sounds like it's a good structure. I've seen some really cool projects even here in Asheville that even I have some friends that are working on. But I said, you got to know what the investment is. And I think that's key, right? We're talking about the same thing, which is, it's good to save taxes, but don't let the tax tail wag the investment dog. I think you always have to be comfortable with the investment. If you're forced into an investment, if it's not the right time, if it's not the right investment, it's not ideal, then it doesn't really matter how much you save in tax.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the neat parts about the deferred sales trust is you can practice not only optimal timing, meaning there's no forced 45-day identification, 180-day close, or even with the opportunity zones, basically forcing you to stay for 10 years, right? Plus,
Yeah.
as well having to basically, whatever the investment is, to double that in order to get the actual tax freedom that's with that. But the deferred sales trust allows you to go into stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Not that I'm actually the least fan of those, but you can actually put it into T-bills. T-bills are paying 4 to 5% right now.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it's a U.S. government. The government fails, right? And so we have clients that really only do real estate, but they'll put some liquidity into some T-bills, and they're waiting for the real estate market to shift. You can also do lending to multifamily operators. That's one of my favorites. You can do it into multifamily funds like your, Chris, or deals that you're syndicating, right? Which is amazing. But the point is, you can go to self-storage, mobile home park, parking lots, multifamily, right? You can do some building projects. You could do some value add existing deals. You can do some lending. The point is, you don't have to do anything. You can sit in the bank and wait, and you can slowly dollar cost average or diversify within the commercial real estate space. And that allows you to have some of those freedoms, such as debt freedom, diversification freedom, 1031 freedom. And oh, by the way, on the other side, the way that we structure it, you can joint venture partner with the trust and get a new depreciation schedule, which is part of what we teach, Chris, which is, it's not just about cash flow, it's about tax flow, right? You want to be able to use cost segregation or straight line depreciation to offset the income that's coming in, so that at the actual level of where you get taxed, it could be potentially zero. And imagine a lot of your deals are like that, Chris, right? So all of these things work together, but most people are just so focused on cash flow, they're not looking at the tax flow portion of it. And then the deferred sales trust really opens up that tax flow freedom. Then you couple that with optimal timing and cash flow freedom that you like to provide on passive deals, right? And it's like a marriage, right? That just fits.
Yeah, no, I love that. You know what? I mean, we can talk about the structure, Brett. I'd love to go through an example. I know you have a client. I don't want to use his name necessarily, but he sold a property. I think it was around a seven and a half. It was at $7.6 million property. Had debt, and he used a deferred sales trust versus a 1031 exchange. Could we go through an example?
Yeah.
And
he
share
doesn't
with the
mind
audience
sharing
kind
his
of how that
name.
works?
I mean,
Oh, perfect. There we go.
His name is Dave, and you can actually watch him on my YouTube channel. Just go to my YouTube channel, Capital Gains Tax Solutions. He literally shares his entire story. In fact, he sold this deal in Athens, Georgia. And he has done hundreds of sales over the years, and lots of 1031 exchanges. And he decided for the first time to use the deferred sales trust. And he would ask that, well, isn't it just swap until you drop, Brett? Isn't it just, get the stepped up basis? Doesn't it make the most sense? And, in Dave's words, the DST was created for times like this. And what do we mean by that? Well, times when you're uncertain about the marketplace, real estate or stock market, uncertain about debt, uncertain about banks, uncertain about a lot of different things, where you can now pay off your debt. So he had about 4.6 million of debt on the $7.7 million asset. So we saved his failing 1031 exchange. He was able to pay off all of his debt and net into the trust about 3.1 million, and take a promissory note back. And the promissory note is slowly paying him. Now for him, not only did it pay off his debt, diversify his wealth, he was able to invest it passively with Brian Burke. You may know Brian. And it was able to invest with him. And then he had a home run on a deal in Florida. And then he was also able to put it into the multifamily and their lending fund and get a nice solid return there. He's one of the guys. He's not a stock market guy, right? So he went just basically real estate and kept some liquidity on the side. And so this is Dave's story. He also wanted to retire. He's a part of the baby boomers, which is part of the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet. For him, it was created for times like this, because guess what? He doesn't need or want to have to go into another deal and get tied up for 3 to 5 years and not have the liquidity or diversification or the ability to spend and enjoy his time and energy. And he lives in California, right, which is very difficult to own a lot of real estate there. So for a number of reasons, he used the deferred sales trust and not the 1031.
Yeah, no, I love that. So we'll make sure I'll get the link so we can put that in the show notes so people can go to YouTube and check that out. So you touched on another issue, which I'd love to kind of dive into this a little bit. So, we have, I think when I started talking about this, it was, it's tens of trillions of dollars now of wealth that's going to be transferred from the baby boomers to the millennials. And I know a lot of millennials are nervous because they're saying, well, hey, I don't, I don't want to, I don't want to, sell all these assets, whether it's their business or real estate, or maybe it's a stock portfolio. That's not, I mean, as you know, that's not as common with ultra high net worth individuals. Typically it's real estate and businesses where they've created a lot of their wealth, but, they have children that may not want to, either own the real estate or run it. They may not want to run the business and do that. And they're trying to figure out what to do. So, how can that help this generation and what they're trying to accomplish, Brett?
Yeah, great question, Chris. And the first thing is to define, what the challenge or the problem is or the need is, right? Beyond just the flexibility and the freedoms that they desire for their time, their energy, their wealth. Our clients, and if you're listening to this and you have $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain is the minimum for the Deferred Sales Trust.
All right, $1 million gain.
Okay. Yeah, $1 million gain. Unless you have two at 500 each that you can combine. It could be LP position or it could be a smaller asset, but it needs to be 2 at 500 that you can combine it basically into one. So the first thing is all about discovering the need for the investor. And so whether you be an entrepreneur and you want that flexibility, like we have a client named Shay Pope who sold an over $2 million business, deferred his tax and invested into multifamily development with the project. That was his thing, right? And so you can't 1031 a business. So that was his need. Or it was like Dave, where he's going, I want to exit and I want to defer up to 100% of the capital gains tax. And that capital gains tax was somewhere between around 40% or so of his gain, right?
Oh, wow.
And so depending on what the need is, you're going to define that tax. Also, the other need for the ultra high net worth individual is the estate tax. And that has to do with 40% debt tax on anything above essentially 24 million married, 12 million single, adjusted for inflation about 14. That's set to expire and drop in half in 2026. So as soon as you understand what their tax problem is, then the next thing is what's the ideal outcome? What's the ideal outcome? Well, location freedom, time freedom, optimal timing, investing freedom, estate tax freedom, 1031 freedom. Then you start to add up what you're really trying to achieve. And for some people, it's selling a primary home in the Silicon Valley that they live there for 25 years, and the value is a $10 million house, and they're real estate rich, but they're cash flow poor, and it doesn't qualify for a 1031. And so there's
so say that one more time. I think you just made a really good point. So if you're renting a property, we have a lot of investors. They sell a property, maybe a rental. I just had an investor. He sold a single family rental in California and netted over $2 million. But what you're saying is, this is somebody that has a primary residence that may be worth $2, $5, $10 million. They can put that into a deferred sales trust.
100%. And that's actually the lowest hanging fruit out of all of this, right? Because it primary home is not a 1031 eligible. Businesses are also not 1031 eligible, right? Neither is crypto or public or private stock, really anything, artwork, collectibles, none of those are 1031 eligible. And so us in the real estate world, and I'm a part of that real estate world. I love real estate. I love 1031s. But guess what? 1031 is blockbuster because it's so restrictive that it only works for certain things. Or there's a thing called, we call it Netflix, or the Deferred Sales Trust version of exit planning. It gives you way more, it gives you flexibility. It gives you diversification. Now, does it come with fees? Yeah, it's higher fees. Absolutely. Fees are about 1.5% to 2% recurring on the net proceeds. It's about 1.5% to set it up. So it's expensive, right? Compared to the 1031, which is like $1,500. But if you're selling a $10 million asset and you have $3 or $4 million of tax, it's an investment and not an expense, right? You have to work with a third-party trustee. That's us. If you need or want to spend it on all of your own your personal stuff, the government doesn't allow us to defer tax on personal stuff. You'll receive payments from the trust. You'll pay tax on that. So it's just an installment. So, but yeah, it works for primary homes, S Corps, C Corps, LLCs, businesses, you name it. You can separate partnerships. We did a $12.5 million of crypto before the crash, and they were able to reinvest that and diversify that wealth, which was huge. So
yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So you can go from one of those different assets into real estate. You can go from real estate into those other assets. It can be rental, it can be commercial, it can be personal. That's wonderful. So go through this, like, how does that work? So walk through kind of the structure, Brett, and how that works.
Yeah. And so, step one is, let's imagine Chris was selling a multifamily property to Dan down the street, right? And Dan's like, hey, Chris, I'd like to buy your deal. It's worth $10 million. And let's imagine you've owned it for 27.5 years as multifamily. So you fully depreciate it. And you have no debt to keep it simple, right? Now, Chris could finance Dan. In other words, Dan could say, I'll put
Sure.
2 million down. Chris,
Yep.
would you carry back 8 million? I don't want to get the financing from the banks. And,
Yep.
and Dan says, it's a good deal for you, Chris, because you're not going to pay tax on what you haven't received. It's a deferral.
Right.
And you're like, oh, that's a
Yep.
good point. Yeah.
Yep.
And, but here's the challenge with the traditional installment sale is that the timing is typically 3 to 5 years, no prepay, and they're going to pay tax anyways, and you forfeit the 1031. And so you're like, but for some people, they'll take that deal because they just want to defer the tax. Well,
Sure.
we do the exact same thing, except we give you a lot more flexibility, and the timing can go on for as long as you want. And what we do is we insert a trust right in between you and Dan. And we tell Dan, you know what, Dan, you seem like a great guy, but you go get a loan or you pay all cash, but we're not financing you, right? So you just bring the full 10 million, however you're going to bring it. But right before close of escrow, there's a transaction in between where Chris sells the asset to the trust in exchange for a promissory note for 10 million.
Yep.
And since you haven't received any down payment at closing, you pay no tax. You're in a deferral state. You did 100% seller carryback, and immediately that asset is sold from the trust to Dan for 10 million. And so the trust bought and sold for the same price. It has no gain. Dan takes the asset, he's gone. And your structured, the structured installment sale is essentially 6 to 9%, depending on your risk tolerance, of which this is where the cool thing happens. You can start to invest back into your own deals passively and diversify, and no timing restrictions because we're not in the 1031 anymore.
Yeah. Interesting. And we've had multiple conversations around this. I've heard you live talk about this. I think the best thing is if this is interesting to somebody, that they reach out to you and do it. But before you do that, they could get a copy of your book, right, Brett? What is somebody going to learn if they get and read your new book?
Yeah, and so it's called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. We actually just hit #1 bestseller on the wealth and real estate categories.
Awesome, man.
Thank you. Yeah, and so it was a big release just about a week and a half ago. And by the way, they say to get in the room with really smart people, like get in the room with Chris, right? You're going to level up. This isn't just my book, right? I got in a book with some really smart people. Now I have a couple chapters, but we've got some amazing multifamily entrepreneurs in here, amazing financial planners, amazing people who help build businesses, right? And so it's all about building a capital gains tax exit plan. You know, when you go to exit, right? And it's unlocking an ideal wealth plan, right? An ideal wealth plan is not just finances, but it goes back to that time, that energy, that location freedom, that entrepreneurial freedom, and really to be able to make an impact to the causes that you believe in most without having to forfeit or pay 25 to 50% of your gain being wiped out by capital gains tax, right? And so it's my story about how I came to understand know, like, and trust the Deferred Sales Trust, the certainty of conviction, help you to overcome false beliefs on what it's too good to be true. My CPA would have heard about it. How do we know it's legal? Like how to make this thing an investment, not an expense. And so we just kind of give you our secrets and say, check it out, read it, learn. So that hopefully that answers the question. You can go to Amazon right now and pick it up.
Awesome. Beautiful. And we'll put that link in the show notes as well, Brett. And you also have a coaching program now. Is that right?
Yeah. So experttaxsecrets.com. And it's an ability for anyone who's listening to this podcast or anyone out there that's working with high net worth individuals, right? Who's a commercial real estate syndicator, who is a luxury realtor, a commercial real estate broker, a CPA, a financial advisor. And they're looking to level up the ability to add value in a world that's constantly being commoditized, right? And automated and AI'd out, right? And so how do you do that? Well, you do that with the biggest expense that your clients are facing. And typically the #1 reason they're not selling, so that you can grow your business, right? When you understand what's available, it unlocks the capital that can flow. In fact, by the way, it's actually about 84 trillion, according to John Chang, at Marcus and Millichap at the Best Ever Conference, spoke on stage while we were both there in Utah just about a month and a half ago. And he said,
it was 60
trillion.
when we first started. 60 just not too long, like 5 years ago. Right. Now it's probably close to 90. Well, market dipped. It was 90, I think. Wow. It's incredible.
Right. So think about it. It's the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet. There's 10,000 babies turning 65 every single day in the US, and there's 77 million in the US alone. And so you look at this large, it's actually, we're going to be good stewards, Chris, with our parents and the generation passing it down. It's a battle for the freedom of America, I believe. It's not just about tax and savings and deferral and elimination of estate tax. It's actually who's going to control the capital, which is going to ultimately give a lot of the power. And so our
Absolutely.
goal is to keep it in the hands of the entrepreneurs, of the people, to give to the causes we still believe in most, right? We can hold accountable to build multifamily housing, to make an impact and to make a dent and create more jobs with the capital. Because we believe all of this sleeping capital, give you a few examples. You live in La Jolla, it's a $20 million house that you bought 30 years ago that for $2 million. Well, there's $28 million that if we unlock that capital and it flows into someone like Chris, who's either building or buying multifamily, it's going to create more housing, right? But if it's just sitting there because people are concerned about the tax and they're just waiting for that stepped up basis, guess what? It's not going to be doing the impact it could be doing. And then fast forward, even somebody sells that even worse. They don't know about our strategy. They haven't got confident about what it could do for them. They just end up paying the tax. And guess how quickly the government's going to spend that money, Chris? No matter what side you vote for,
they already spent it.
It's just going to be gone. It's going to be gone, right? And so we've got to work together to educate people, to help people understand this, and ultimately to execute on the business plan. And this is what we love to do.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. And look, you know, I know you believe this too, Brett, that, you know, you, if you're listening, are the best steward of your money. You know, whether you want to use that to invest in an affordable housing project like we're doing in Houston right now, whether you want to donate to one of your favorite causes, you know, whether you want to, you know, set up a trust or something where you can help, you know, your grandchildren, you know, go to college and do different things. Ultimately, yeah, we believe that that's the best thing to do. And that's what really drives all this stuff.
It truly is what it is, right? And so hopefully you're sensing and feeling and hearing that. And so we're all in this fight together, and it's kind of like a reverse Tea Party if you think about it, right? When the Tea Party first started out, it was like, hey, how do we get freedom and basically representation and the ability to have a voice? Well, if all the money goes to tax or the government, it's going to be tough, right? It's kind of a reverse Tea Party. So we're in the battle, but you know, it's tough. It's tough with what's happening, but we do believe the DST is foundational for a lot of these things. By the way, you can still give to charity, but you don't have to give to charity, right? We can also combine it with different strategies too. Sometimes we're doing a partial 1031, a partial Delaware, and then a partial deferred sales trust. And so it's not just one size fits all, but a lot of our clients are opting for it because of the times that we're in right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic resource, which is why we had you back on, Brett. What is the best way if people want to learn more about this, get a copy of your book, share with the audience what's your best way to connect with you is?
Yeah, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. It's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's the logo there. You can search us on YouTube, Capital Gains Tax Solutions, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can search my name, Brett Swarts, and then of course pick up the book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. We do have Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book. That was one of the really smart people I was talking about, a billionaire entrepreneur, right? Who's in the book, which is pretty cool. And so you can check out the book by going to Amazon.
Awesome, man. We'll have all those show links. We'll have all those links in the show notes that we got from you here. And then please check out Brett's website, pick up a copy of the book if you think this might be a good fit for you. Brett, always great to talk to you, my friend.
Thanks, Chris.